He was a single father, living in a modest apartment in the city. Every morning he woke up before sunrise to make sure his little boy was ready for school. He prepared breakfast, packed lunch, and tied the small backpack onto his son's shoulders. There was no rush, just a careful rhythm that had become his daily habit. He had learned to balance work, parenting, and life's small emergencies with patience, even if some days it felt impossible. His son was his world, and everything he did was for him. On this particular morning, he kissed his boy goodbye at the school gate. The little boy waved, his face full of innocence and energy, completely unaware of the struggles his father faced every day. Walking back, the father felt the usual twinge of worry. Bills were waiting to be paid, errands were piling up, and his job at the small delivery company meant he often worked long hours. Yet he never complained. Life had taught him resilience, and he carried it quietly, without expecting recognition. After finishing his errands in the neighborhood, he found himself near a downtown office building, a tall glass structure that reflected the morning sun. He had come here to drop off a package for a client, but as he stepped inside, he noticed something unusual. A small crowd had gathered near the elevators. People were talking in worried whispers, some checking their phones, others pressing buttons nervously. Curious, he moved closer and quickly understood why. One of the elevators had stopped mid-floor, and inside a woman was trapped. She looked tense, anxious, and slightly panicked. She was dressed sharply, a suit that spoke of authority and a high-profile position, and she held her smartphone tightly, pressing it against her ear as if trying to call for help. The man paused for a moment. Normally, he would just observe, maybe step aside and let others handle it. But something about her situation pulled him forward. He didn't think about recognition or reward. He just saw someone in need and he acted. He stepped closer to the glass doors, crouched slightly to make his voice calm and friendly, and called out, "It's okay. Don't worry. Help is on the way. Just stay calm." The woman looked down, surprised to see a stranger speaking to her. Her eyes widened slightly as if she hadn't expected anyone to notice her distress. I don't know how long I'll be stuck here," she said, her voice shaking slightly. He smiled reassuringly. "It might be a few minutes, maybe more, but panicking won't help. I'll stay here and make sure you're okay." For the next few minutes, he talked to her calmly. He asked small questions, anything to distract her from the fear. He commented lightly on the weather, asked if she liked coffee, mentioned the building's lobby art. His tone was steady, grounded. He didn't try to impress her or act like a hero. He just spoke as someone who genuinely cared that the person inside felt safe. Behind him, the crowd was getting restless. Some people were stepping back, others checking their watches. But he stayed focused. His own errands, his own schedule, none of that mattered right now. All that mattered was that she felt calm and supported. Finally, after what felt like an eternity to those inside, a maintenance worker arrived, carrying tools and speaking into a radio. The man stepped aside but stayed near the doors, giving the trapped woman space while also keeping her company. She glanced at him, a faint smile breaking through her anxious expression. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. She recognized his patience, his calm presence, and his kindness. The elevator doors slowly began to open. She stepped out cautiously, taking deep breaths, and looked at him with gratitude. "Thank you," she said sincerely, her voice steadier now. I don't even know how to thank you properly." He shook his head. "No need, just glad you're safe." She looked at him for a moment longer. There was a curiosity in her eyes, a question that she didn't voice. She had clearly encountered many people in her world, but rarely someone who helped without expecting anything in return. He didn't ask for her name, her position, or anything else. He had acted purely out of concern for another human being. The man turned and walked away, his thoughts already returning to the errands waiting for him, the bills that needed attention, the child who would soon be waiting for him at home. The encounter felt ordinary to him, just a part of life, but for the woman it lingered in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone like him, someone so grounded, so kind, so human, was rare in her world. As he returned to his small apartment later that day, he reflected briefly on the morning. It had been a little unusual, yes, but ultimately it was just another moment in his life filled with small decisions, small acts that added up over time. He fed his son, helped with homework, and tucked him into bed. The boy smiled, sleepy and unaware of the small act of courage and kindness his father had shown that morning. Later that night, lying awake for a few moments before sleep, the man thought about the elevator incident once more. He wondered if she would remember, if she would speak to anyone about it. But he didn't dwell on it. He had helped, she was safe, and that was enough. There was no need for accolades, no need for recognition. Helping someone in need was its own reward. Meanwhile, the woman back in her sleek office building sat quietly at her desk. She replayed the moments in the elevator over and over in her mind. She remembered his calm voice, his reassuring words, the way he stayed composed even as others around seemed nervous. There was something about him that struck her deeply. She realized she had rarely met someone so grounded, so genuinely caring in a world full of business transactions and formalities. Days passed, but she couldn't forget him. Every time she thought of that morning, she felt a mix of gratitude and curiosity. She wondered about the man who had helped her, who hadn't asked for anything in return, who had just been there when she needed someone the most. She didn't know his name, his story, or his life circumstances. She only knew that he had reminded her of the goodness that still existed in the world. For the single father, life continued as usual. He worked, took care of his son, and handled the small challenges that life presented every day. He didn't expect to see the woman again. To him, it had been a fleeting moment, a brief intersection of two lives. But sometimes he thought about the expression on her face as she stepped out of the elevator, the quiet relief she had shown, and he felt a small sense of satisfaction. He had done the right thing, and that was enough. It was a simple story of human connection, of small acts that can have a quiet but lasting impact. The man had acted without expectation, and the woman had experienced something rare, unselfish kindness. It was a reminder that in the midst of busy lives, unexpected moments could create memories that linger, shaping perspectives and inspiring thoughts far beyond the initial encounter. And though neither of them realized it fully at that moment, this brief meeting in a stuck elevator was just the beginning. Their lives had touched in a small but meaningful way, setting the stage for a story neither of them could have predicted. The next few minutes after the elevator doors opened felt strange for both of them. The woman stepped out carefully, her hands slightly trembling. The man stayed close, not intruding, but ready to help if she needed it. The building maintenance worker was already at the scene, checking the elevator, pressing buttons, and speaking into a radio. The woman took a deep breath, finally able to move freely. She looked around at the crowd and then back at the man. I don't know how you stayed so calm, she said quietly, almost to herself. I don't think I could have done that without you. He shrugged, a modest smile on his face. I've seen people get scared before. It's normal. You just need someone to stay steady. She nodded, clearly impressed by his words. Most people around her would have panicked, complained, or waited for others to act. But this man, someone completely unknown to her, had stayed grounded, offered reassurance, and made sure she felt safe. Seriously, she said, her voice firmer now. Thank you. I mean it. You didn't have to do anything, and yet you stayed there. It meant a lot. He waved his hand. It's fine. I was just making sure you were okay. That's all. She studied him for a moment. He was simple, unassuming, and humble, yet there was a quiet strength in his presence. She realized she had rarely seen anyone so genuine, so unpretentious in her life. People in her world often acted for appearances or recognition, but this man didn't seek anything. He had acted purely out of human kindness. The maintenance worker finally confirmed that the elevator was safe again. People began moving away, returning to their routines, but she lingered. She seemed hesitant to let the moment pass.
Can I at least give you something?
A thank you, a coffee, anything, she asked. He shook his head, smiling gently. No need, just glad you're safe. That's enough for me. Still, she couldn't let it go. She was used to control, to planning, to being in charge. But this encounter was different. It reminded her that some things, like kindness, courage, and integrity, couldn't be measured by status or power. They existed naturally in people, sometimes in the most unexpected places. Finally, she took a small step back, straightened her suit, and offered him a nod of genuine respect. Thank you again, she said softly, almost reverently. He nodded in return and turned away, heading back to his own life. He didn't linger, didn't expect recognition, and certainly didn't anticipate that this brief encounter would leave a lasting impression on her. For him, it was just another day, a small act done in the course of living life. Later, as he returned home, he thought briefly about the incident, but only as a small ripple in the stream of his busy life. He fed his son, helped him with homework, and tucked him into bed. That night, as he sat alone for a few moments, he didn't even consider that the woman might remember him. For him, it had been a fleeting intersection of two lives, but for her, the encounter stayed with her. Back at her office, she replayed the event in her mind. She remembered his calm voice, the patience he had shown, the way he had reassured her without expecting anything. She realized that in the world she lived in, where people often acted for recognition or gain, this simple, honest act was remarkable. The memory of his face, his words, and his demeanor lingered. She wondered who he was, what his life was like, and how someone so grounded existed in the middle of a busy city filled with stress and pretense. She felt a strange pull, a curiosity and admiration she hadn't expected, and though neither of them knew it at the time, this moment was the beginning of something neither could have anticipated. A small, quiet act of human kindness had created a connection, however subtle, that would ripple forward in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The morning air in the lobby was crisp, carrying a faint scent of coffee from a nearby cafe. The single father had just entered the building to drop off a package when he noticed the unusual crowd gathering around one of the elevators. People were whispering nervously, some glancing at their watches, others peering curiously through the glass doors. He quickly realized that something serious had happened. One of the elevators had stopped, and inside a woman was trapped. She was dressed sharply, a suit that spoke of professionalism and authority, and she held her phone tightly in one hand. Her other hand rested on the elevator wall as she pressed herself against it for support. The worry in her eyes was unmistakable. She was breathing quickly, her movements jittery, as though every second that passed added to her anxiety. The man took a step forward, feeling a pull in his chest. He didn't know her, and she didn't know him. Yet he felt an instinctive need to help. He approached the elevator calmly, speaking in a gentle voice that carried reassurance. "It's okay," he called softly. "Help is on the way. Don't panic. You'll be fine." The woman looked down at him, surprised. She hadn't expected anyone to speak, let alone someone so calm and composed. Her voice wavered slightly as she responded, I don't know how long I'll be stuck. This isn't supposed to happen." He smiled gently. "It might take a few minutes, maybe longer, but panicking won't help. Stay calm. I'll stay here and make sure you're okay." For several minutes he talked to her quietly, asking small questions, anything to distract her from the rising panic. He mentioned the weather, commented on the artwork in the lobby, and even joked lightly about the elevator buttons being a mystery. His tone was steady, grounded, and comforting. He didn't act like a hero or demand attention. He simply focused on keeping her calm, keeping her human in a situation that could have felt terrifyingly impersonal. Behind him, people in the lobby began murmuring nervously. Some were checking their phones, trying to call maintenance or building management. Others just watched, unsure what to do. But he remained present, entirely focused on the woman inside. His own errands, his own schedule, his responsibilities as a father, all of it faded into the background. At that moment, all that mattered was the safety and comfort of the stranger trapped inside the elevator. The minutes stretched slowly. He noticed her hands tightening around the phone, the tension in her shoulders, the subtle tremor in her voice. "It feels so claustrophobic in here," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "I know," he said softly. "I can imagine it's uncomfortable. But you're strong. You're handling this better than you think. Just keep breathing, one step at a time." She glanced down at him again. There was a flicker of gratitude in her eyes, but also surprise. It wasn't every day someone offered help so genuinely, without expectation or judgment. She realized that he wasn't just trying to calm her. He genuinely cared. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a maintenance worker arrived, carrying a toolbox and speaking into a radio. The man stepped back slightly, giving the woman space while still staying nearby. She looked at him once more, a small, nervous smile forming. "Thank you," she whispered. I can't tell you how much it helped just having someone to talk to. Someone who wasn't rushing or panicking." He shook his head modestly. "You're welcome. Just glad you're okay." The maintenance worker quickly got to work, pressing buttons, checking the elevator mechanisms, and reassuring her that everything would be fine. Slowly, the elevator doors creaked open. She stepped out cautiously, taking careful steps onto solid ground. She inhaled deeply, relief washing over her face. The man stayed close, offering silent support. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were filled with a mixture of gratitude and wonder. I've never had someone do this for me, she said softly. Most people just look away or call for help and leave it at that. You actually stayed. You actually cared, he smiled faintly. I just wanted to make sure you were safe. That's all. She studied him for a moment. There was something about him that struck her. His calm presence, his humility, the way he spoke without pretense. In her world of high-powered meetings, deadlines, and constant evaluation, people were often motivated by reward, recognition, or advancement. But this man, someone entirely unknown to her, had acted purely out of kindness. It was remarkable. Can I at least offer you a coffee or something? She asked. Her voice was polite but carried genuine intent. I want to show my thanks in some way. He shook his head, smiling. No need, really. I'm just glad you're safe. Despite his refusal, she lingered a little longer, as if trying to understand him. She realized she had rarely met someone so grounded, someone so unassuming yet so strong in character. It was unusual in her world to encounter people whose actions weren't influenced by status or expectation. Here was a man who had no reason to help her, no reward, no recognition, no obligation, yet he had acted purely out of human concern. The crowd around them began to disperse. People returned to their routines, heading to their offices or meetings, but she remained still, quietly absorbing the experience. She glanced at him one last time, her eyes reflecting admiration and a hint of curiosity. Thank you again, she said softly. He nodded and turned to leave, returning to his own life. To him, it had been just a small part of the day, a brief moment where he did what he felt was right. Life had taught him to handle challenges without expectation, and he carried that philosophy in every action. Later that day, back at his small apartment, he went through his usual routine. He fed his son, helped him with homework, and tucked him into bed. The elevator incident seemed like a fleeting moment, a small ripple in the stream of his otherwise busy life. He didn't expect to be remembered, didn't anticipate that his act of kindness would leave a lasting impression. For him, helping someone in need was its own reward, but the woman couldn't forget him. Back in her sleek office, she replayed the morning in her mind. She remembered his calm voice, the way he had reassured her without drawing attention to himself, the patience he had shown while others had merely watched. It was rare, she realized, to meet someone whose actions weren't motivated by recognition, ambition, or reward. She wondered about him. Who was he? What was his life like? How could someone so grounded, so selfless exist in a busy city filled with stress and pretense? She felt a strange mixture of gratitude, curiosity, and admiration that she hadn't expected to feel. Days passed, but the memory lingered. Every time she thought of that morning, she felt a small warmth, a reminder that kindness existed in its purest form. She realized that sometimes the smallest acts, offered without thought of reward, could leave the deepest impact. And though neither of them knew it at the time, this encounter in the elevator was just the beginning. Their lives had intersected in a fleeting yet meaningful way, setting the stage for moments neither could have imagined. The man, living quietly, unassumingly, had touched someone's life profoundly. The woman, high in her corporate world, had been reminded that genuine humanity could exist in unexpected places. That small act of courage, patience, and kindness had created a ripple. One day, she would find a way to express its true significance. But for now, it remained a quiet story shared between two strangers. A human connection formed in the unlikeliest of circumstances. Days passed after the elevator incident, and life returned to its usual rhythm for the single father. His mornings were filled with preparing his little boy for school, making sure he had breakfast, helping him tie his small backpack, and walking him to the school gate. Work remained demanding, but he moved through it with quiet determination. The small apartment they lived in was modest yet warm, filled with love and the laughter of his son. He never thought much about the elevator incident anymore. To him, it was simply a moment when he had done the right thing, nothing more. Meanwhile, the woman he had helped could not stop thinking about him. His calm voice, his patience, and the way he had stayed by her side without expecting anything lingered in her mind like a quiet echo. She found herself recounting the moment to a colleague, unable to explain why it had affected her so deeply. In her world of high-powered meetings, business decisions, and constant evaluation, people acted in predictable ways, looking for recognition, rewards, or opportunities. But he had been different. He had been human in a way that surprised her. Curiosity grew in her mind. Who was he? What was his life like? How could someone live in a busy city, face challenges, yet still remain so calm and grounded? She realized that she wanted to meet him again. Not for business, not for appearances, but simply to thank him properly and perhaps understand the person behind the kindness. One morning, a few days after the incident, she returned to the building where the elevator had stopped. She inquired discreetly with the building management, asking if they could help her find the man who had stayed with her. The staff initially looked confused, but after she explained the situation in detail, they promised to try. They asked for his name, but all she could recall was his kind face, the calm tone of his voice, and his reassuring presence. It took some time, but finally, they located him. The man worked at a small delivery company and lived just a few blocks from the building. When she arrived at his workplace that morning, she felt a nervous excitement she hadn't expected. She had met countless people in her life, but this was different. This was someone who had touched her with no agenda, and that feeling was new, almost unsettling in its depth. She walked into the small office, where he was busy sorting deliveries and talking to his colleagues. When he noticed her standing in the doorway, he straightened up, slightly confused. "Can I help you?" he asked politely, wiping his hands on a cloth. She smiled softly, her eyes carrying a warmth he hadn't seen before.
Yes, she said.
"You might not remember me, but a few days ago you helped me when I was stuck in an elevator in your building. I wanted to find you to say thank you properly." His brow furrowed slightly in surprise. "Oh, that's you?" he asked as recognition dawned. "I didn't think about it much after that day. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." She nodded. "I know, and I appreciate that more than I can say. Most people would have walked away, called someone, or done nothing. But you stayed. You stayed with me, made sure I was calm, and helped me feel safe. That meant a lot. It still does." He felt a quiet flush of modesty. Praise was not something he sought, and he often downplayed his actions. I was doing what I thought was right. I didn't expect you to come looking for me," he admitted. She shook her head, smiling. "I had to. It's not every day you meet someone who acts out of pure kindness. And honestly, I've been thinking about it a lot. Your calmness, your patience, your integrity, it's rare. In my world, most people act with some kind of agenda, but you reminded me that there are people who still do the right thing, simply because it's right. I wanted to meet you again, to thank you properly, and to understand you." He blinked, astonished. He wasn't used to this. Recognition, praise, or curiosity from someone in her world, someone who clearly lived a life far removed from his, was unexpected. He had acted from instinct, from a sense of responsibility to another human being. That it had left such an impression on her caught him off guard. They began talking in the small office. She asked about his life, his work, his routines, and his son. He answered simply, without embellishment, describing the challenges he faced as a single father, the responsibilities he carried, and the joy his child brought him. He spoke honestly, his words carrying the warmth of someone grounded in reality, someone who had learned to handle life's difficulties with patience and resilience. She listened intently, captivated not just by his story but by the way he told it. There was no pretense, no desire to impress, just honesty. She realized that in her world of polished appearances and calculated moves, such authenticity was a rare treasure. She felt herself drawn to his calm presence, appreciating the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him without effort. As their conversation continued, she shared a little about her own life. Her work was demanding, her days filled with decisions that affected hundreds of people. She had little time for anything outside her responsibilities. But she admitted that his act of kindness had stayed with her, forcing her to pause and reflect. It had made her reconsider how she approached her daily interactions, how she viewed people, and even how she measured success. She had realized that no achievement, no title, no recognition could replace the simple human connection she had experienced with him. He listened, absorbing her words, quietly astonished. He hadn't expected that a small act, simply being present, speaking kindly, staying calm, could resonate so deeply with someone else. He realized slowly that what seemed ordinary to him had been extraordinary to her. His humility made him momentarily speechless, and he found himself reflecting on the ripple effect of small actions. "I didn't realize," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "that just being there could mean so much to someone. I thought it was just the right thing to do." She nodded, smiling softly. "And it was. It still is. And that's why I wanted to meet you. Not just to thank you, but to tell you that your actions, they matter. More than you know." There was a quiet pause filled with mutual understanding. Neither of them had expected this moment. Neither had sought it. And yet here they were, two lives that had briefly intersected in a way that neither could forget. She, a woman of power and responsibility, and he, a humble single father, connected through a simple act of kindness that transcended social boundaries. As they continued to talk, the initial tension eased. They laughed softly at small anecdotes from their lives, shared brief moments of personal reflection, and discovered a shared understanding of human struggles and triumphs. For her, it was a rare glimpse into a life lived with honesty and courage, unburdened by appearances. For him, it was a moment of recognition, a reminder that even the simplest acts of kindness could leave a lasting mark. Before leaving, she looked at him once more, her eyes sincere. "I'm glad I found you," she said quietly, "not just to thank you, but because you reminded me that there are people in this world who act from the heart, without expectation. That's important. That's rare. And it shouldn't be overlooked." He nodded, a quiet warmth spreading through him. He didn't know what would come of this meeting, and he didn't anticipate anything more. But in that moment, he understood the power of a simple act, the impact of being present and kind, and the unexpected ways human connections could ripple forward. When she left, he returned to his routine, feeling an unusual sense of reflection. For the first time, he realized that his life, his choices, and his small acts of care had meaning beyond the walls of his apartment, beyond the errands and routines of his days. And though he remained humble, he felt quietly proud, not for recognition, but for knowing that genuine human kindness had the power to touch someone deeply, to leave an imprint that could inspire change and reflection. A few days after their meeting, the single father continued with his usual routine. Life had a comforting rhythm: school drop-offs, work, household chores, and evenings spent with his son. Even though he was busy, he carried a quiet peace within him, a calm born from years of managing responsibilities alone. Yet there was a subtle excitement lingering under the surface, the kind that came from knowing someone had remembered him, someone had appreciated him for something he considered ordinary. The woman he had helped that day in the elevator had been thinking about him constantly. His calm demeanor, his patient words, and the simple, unassuming way he had supported her had left a mark she couldn't shake. She realized that what he had done went far beyond the elevator itself. In a world where people often acted with agendas or expected rewards, he had acted purely out of care. That realization had stayed with her, growing in significance with each passing day. Determined to express her thoughts fully, she requested another meeting with him. This time, it wasn't just about thanking him for helping in the elevator. It was about sharing how deeply his actions had affected her, and how much they had inspired her to reflect on her own life. She wanted him to understand that sometimes, even small acts of kindness could have profound consequences. When she arrived at the modest apartment he shared with his son, she was struck again by the warmth of his world. The walls were simple, adorned with a few family pictures, a small bookshelf, and the toys of a young child scattered in quiet corners. It was a stark contrast to her corporate offices and structured life, yet she felt an immediate sense of calm. This was a life lived with heart, with purpose, and with a clear focus on what truly mattered. He opened the door, surprised but welcoming. "You again?" he said with a gentle smile. "What brings you here this time?" She stepped inside, her eyes soft with sincerity. "I wanted to talk to you," she began. "Not just to thank you for helping me in the elevator, but because what you did, it stayed with me. It made me think about how I live, the decisions I make, and the people I meet. Your words and your calm presence that day were more powerful than you could imagine." He felt a rush of emotions, humility, disbelief, and quiet pride. He had never considered that his small act could resonate so deeply with anyone, let alone someone from her world. I just did what felt right at the moment," he said softly. I didn't think it would mean that much to anyone. She shook her head, sitting down on the simple sofa in his living room. It did, it really did. You stayed calm even when I was panicking. You spoke gently and you made me feel safe even though you didn't know me. Most people would have done nothing or only followed procedure. But you reminded me of what it means to be human, to care without expecting anything in return. He listened quietly, letting her words sink in. For him, the gesture had been instinctual, simple, and natural. Yet hearing her describe its impact opened his eyes to a different perspective. It was astonishing to realize that one brief moment could carry so much weight in someone's life. She continued, her voice soft but firm. After that day, I've been thinking about my own behavior, my own priorities. I realize that I often focus so much on work, on achievements, and on appearances that I forget the simple things. Patience, understanding, compassion. You reminded me of what I've been missing. You reminded me that genuine care matters more than any title or position. He felt a lump in his throat. He had always believed in the value of helping others, but he had never imagined that such a small act could inspire someone in a world so different from his own. It made him reflect on his own life, the quiet struggles and small victories that shaped him, and the resilience he had developed simply by being present for his son and facing life head-on. Your actions that day, she said, her eyes meeting his, made me think about the people I interact with every day. How often do I rush past without truly seeing them? How often do I forget to listen, to care, to simply be present? You showed me that it's possible to make a difference with small gestures, to bring calm and reassurance when someone needs it most. That's rare and it's powerful. He smiled quietly, humbled by her words. I never thought of it that way, he admitted. I just try to do the right thing. I never imagined it could have that kind of impact. She nodded. And that's why I wanted to come here. I wanted you to know that it did. You might not see it, but your presence, your patience, and your kindness that day stayed with me. They influenced the way I've been thinking about my own life. You inspired me in a way that I didn't expect. He felt a strange warmth spread through him. It wasn't pride in the usual sense, but a quiet recognition that even small, selfless actions could carry meaning beyond the immediate moment. It was a humbling and astonishing realization, one that left him both surprised and deeply touched. For several minutes they sat in silence, letting the weight of the conversation settle. The room was quiet save for the distant sounds of the city outside and the soft laughter of his son playing nearby. In that quiet, he realized the extraordinary power of human connection, the subtle yet profound ways in which one person could influence another, even without grand gestures or dramatic actions. Finally, she spoke again, her voice carrying a hint of emotion. I wanted you to know that I will never forget what you did. And I also want you to understand something important. You have a strength and a humanity that is rare. You carry it in your every action, your every decision, and it shows in the way you live your life. That matters more than you might ever realize. He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He had always believed that kindness mattered, that helping others was simply the right thing to do. But hearing her describe the impact of his actions made him see it in a new light. It wasn't just about doing good. It was about the ripple effect that one small act could create, the way it could inspire, comfort, and even transform someone else's perspective. She paused, her eyes thoughtful. I know this might sound strange, she said, but I felt the need to tell you all of this to make sure you understand the difference you made. You probably don't even realize it, but your calmness, your patience, and your integrity reminded me of what really matters. And that is something I will carry with me from now on. He felt astonished, almost speechless. He had never imagined that his simple presence during a few minutes trapped in an elevator could leave such a lasting impression. It was humbling, and yet it filled him with a quiet joy, the kind that comes from knowing you've touched someone's life in a meaningful way, without seeking anything in return. Thank you, he said finally, his voice soft but sincere. I never expected to have this kind of effect. I just wanted to help. And you did, she replied, smiling gently. More than you know. For the remainder of their time together, they talked quietly, sharing reflections on life, values, and the importance of human connection. He spoke about his experiences as a single father, the challenges and rewards of raising a child alone, and the small moments of joy that made it all worthwhile. She listened intently, genuinely interested, not as a figure of authority, but as a person seeking understanding. She realized that meeting him again and hearing his perspective had given her a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't about work or status. It was about the simple power of human kindness, the ability to impact someone's life with presence and care. She felt inspired to approach her own life differently, to be more patient, more empathetic, and more attentive to the people around her. As she prepared to leave, she looked at him one last time, her eyes full of respect and admiration. "I'm glad I found you," she said quietly. "You reminded me that genuine kindness exists even in the most unexpected places. That is something I will never forget." He nodded, a quiet smile on his face. He didn't know what the future held, and he didn't anticipate any reward or recognition, but he understood something profound. The impact of simple, selfless acts could extend far beyond the moment, leaving impressions that could inspire and change lives in ways one could never predict. When she left, the apartment felt calm and warm, filled with the quiet sense of connection that comes from shared understanding and mutual respect. For him, it was astonishing to realize that a few minutes of patience, calm words, and genuine concern could carry such weight. For her, it was a reminder that human goodness could be found in the most ordinary people, in acts that might seem small but held extraordinary power. And though neither could have anticipated it fully at that time, their encounter had created a lasting impact, one that would continue to influence both of their lives in ways neither had expected. A brief, simple act of kindness had turned into something extraordinary, bridging two very different worlds through honesty, empathy, and human connection. Life for the single father moved forward in its usual rhythm. The days were full of school runs, work responsibilities, household chores, and moments spent playing and laughing with his son. Life wasn't easy, but he managed with patience, determination, and quiet strength. Each day brought its own challenges, yet he met them without complaint, driven by love for his child and a sense of duty. Yet, after the recent encounter with the woman he had helped in the elevator, a subtle change began to occur in his life. It wasn't something that announced itself loudly, but rather a quiet shift in perspective. He began noticing things he had overlooked before, the small acts of kindness from strangers, the little moments of beauty in the everyday, the smiles of people he passed by. Something about their connection had reminded him of the power of human interaction, of being present, and of the ripple effects that simple actions could create. The woman, on the other hand, carried her own transformation. She had returned to her high-pressure world with a sense of reflection she hadn't anticipated. Meetings, deadlines, and decisions still filled her days, but the memory of his calm presence stayed with her. She found herself pausing more often, listening more carefully, and treating others with more patience. It was a subtle but significant shift, born from a few minutes of kindness in a moment of vulnerability. She realized that life wasn't just about achievements or status. It was about the impact you had on others and the way you carried yourself when no one was watching. A week after their second meeting, she decided to reach out once more, not for herself, but to create a bridge of support. She wanted to show that she valued not just what he had done, but who he was. She sent a small note through the building management, asking if he would meet her again. This time it was less about gratitude and more about connection. When he received the message, he felt a mixture of surprise and curiosity. He hadn't expected their paths to cross again, and he certainly hadn't anticipated the depth of her interest in his life. Yet he agreed, intrigued by the sincerity he had seen in her eyes during their previous encounter. The meeting took place at a quiet cafe, a place away from the chaos of both their lives. When she arrived, she greeted him warmly, and he noticed the same sincerity that had struck him before. She spoke openly, not as a CEO addressing someone in service, but as a person speaking to another human being. "I wanted to see you again," she began, "because I realized that our first encounter and our second meeting weren't just